of the Form I-9 and E-Verify as they go. Form I-9 compliance has been in the business since 2004. We just concentrate on I-9 and E-Verify. In 2004, we developed an electronic I-9 form based on the regulations that came out in 2005. We've integrated that through the web services integration with E-Verify. So it's a two-step process. Step one, you complete the electronic I-9, and step two, E-Verify is processed, and you acknowledge the results and respond accordingly. In addition, we've created a management tool where you can also memorialize your historical records into the database, so you have a single source for all your I-9 and E-Verify records, which certainly makes it extremely valuable to you if you receive a notice of inspection or something related to a subpoena based on the request of your records. Our philosophy is not just giving you a software as a service model and saying good luck. We actually try to guide you through the processes that you should incorporate when you transition or when you move from one I-9 vendor to another. In today's session, we're going to go over I-9 and E-Verify requirements. Hopefully you all know about those. The importance of standard operating procedures. I addressed that initially in the beginning, but it's critical that organizations have some well-established standard operating procedures so that everyone's following the same sequences. The detriment of unauthorized workers on payroll, we all know that certain individuals have work documents that expire, or somebody's been run through E-Verify and the case wasn't closed out correctly. That needs to be addressed. E-Verify the common mistakes and misconceptions. Monitoring your electronic database with a compliance dashboard, easily accessible. You also have the ability to pull up reports, but the compliance dashboard is going to give you an immediate, quick view of everything you need to address. Becoming audit ready. Let's face it, the reason everyone does I-9s is because it's required by law. The federal requirement requires that all employers complete a Form I-9 on all W-2 wage earners within a certain time frame. Section 1, on or before the first day. Section 2, by the third business day. So we want to make sure you become audit ready. And the advantages of partnering with somebody like Form I-9, who has partnered with AccuSource to give you a compliant one single source solution. And then we'll go through the Q&A as Stephanie pointed out. The Form I-9 requirements, I'm sure you're all up to date on that, but currently it's a two-page form. The law came into play in November of 1986. All new hires must have an I-9 completed. It's the employer's responsibility to make sure it's completed. Section 1 is the employee information, where the employee provides information, signs under penalty of perjury. Section 2 is where the employee will provide original documents. An authorized representative from the employer will record those documents, attest under penalty of perjury they appear to be genuine and relate to the employee, and execute their signature in Section 2. Maintain that form on file until the employee separates from the company. Then you can put it into a termination status, and you retain it based on the 1-year, 3-year rule. The advantage of an electronic system is it'll guide everyone through the process, and all you have to do is apply a termination date to the record, and it'll calculate that purge date based on the 1-year, 3-year rule. E-Verify is the government database that confirms the information on the I-9 form. So if you just do an I-9 form, that's the law, and you file it away, keep it accessible, make sure it's updated. As I say, the I-9 form is a living, breathing document, so it has to constantly be monitored. E-Verify will take the information from the I-9 form and confirm the work eligibility of those individuals. Now, if you're a federal contractor, you also have a requirement under the FAR regulation that you have to do existing employees. If you have or need information on that, please contact AccuSource and we'll guide you through that process. E-Verify, when somebody signs up for E-Verify, there's a memorandum of understanding that's executed between Department of Homeland Security, Form I-9 Compliance as your employer agent, and also you as the employer. That MOU, as they call, identifies what rules and regulations you need to follow when you access the E-Verify system. We've created a simple process not only to process the E-Verify query, but also to maintain and close out the case appropriately. There's posters required when you utilize E-Verify, so all prospective employees understand that your organization is going to run them through E-Verify. There's 2 in Spanish and 2 in English. Social Security number becomes required in Section 1. If you use E-Verify, the Social Security number is the core feature of E-Verify. That is what's used to process the query. List B documents, you may be familiar with them or not. They contain usually a photograph. They are identity documents. If you use E-Verify and somebody gives you a List B document, it must contain a photograph. And photo tool requirements. Certain documents, when you use E-Verify, a U.S. passport, permanent resident card, and the employment authorization document, all listed under List A. When you process the E-Verify query, the picture used to create the document is going to show on your screen, and you will validate that that matches or not. It must match exactly. It's a way to prevent identity theft. Because of that fact, you're required to maintain a source document related to that permanent resident card, employment authorization document, or U.S. passport, and retain it with your E-Verify record. We have the ability in the system to take a photocopy of the documents, and you can upload those directly to the I-9 record, so you have, again, a single source packet for each employee with their I-9, with E-Verify, and any source documents. There are certain states that have state-level requirements for E-Verify, and the next slide will show you that. And we talked about briefly the federal contractor rule, where if you're a federal contractor and you have a federal contract and it has what is called the FAR clause within that contract, you're required not only to do all your new hires, but you're required to go backwards and do either those assigned to the federal contract or all your existing employees. There's currently talk right now about E-Verify becoming mandatory for all employers. I've currently been to Washington, D.C. 4 times so far, working on that regulation with Senator Grassley and his team to facilitate the mandatory E-Verify legislation. You won't see it this year, but you'll probably see it next year, so it's a good time to get up and running on E-Verify. It will become mandatory for all employers. The next slide is a copy of the United States, and you'll see the red states are those states that have some sort of E-Verify requirement. Pretty soon that'll all be red as it goes mandatory. So again, I highly recommend it's a good time to start using E-Verify. The fines, again, the reason employers do the I-9 form is because it's required by federal law. There's also the result of somebody could knock at your door and issue a subpoena and ask to see your I-9 records. There's been a significant increase in the fines associated with I-9 records. So the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and Labor announced these increase in these civil fines. And you'll see on the next slide, and I'm not going to go through the whole fine schedule, but you'll see that highlighted in yellow, I-9 paperwork errors. So those are errors on the I-9 form, paperwork. They happen all the time, and that's the advantage of an electronic system. It'll eliminate those errors. Those fines were increased from a minimum of $110 to a minimum of $216 per error to a maximum of $1,100, and it's moved up to the new maximum of $2,156. Those are for paperwork violations. So you can see if you have a large number of employees or even a small number of employees, it's your advantage, 1, to start using an electronic system, and 2, to take your historical records and audit those records and then image those, and we index them in the same database. The reason I recommend an audit is because before you memorialize these historical records, you want to make sure there's no errors on there that can be corrected. So prior to doing that, we have auditing services available. We can take your existing I-9s, audit them, assist you in remediation. Employee always has to remediate Section 1 errors. And then we will index them and image them and put them in a database. This fine schedule will show you how those increase in fines is going on. Standard operating procedures. I think, and I've worked with several clients that have received notices of inspection, and one of the first things the government inspector asks for is, you're utilizing an electronic system, give me the standard operating procedures that you're following throughout your organization to do that. Whether you have remote hires, what you do in Section 3, do you retain copies of the documents used provided by the employee in Section 2, do you use E-Verify, where's it processed, how's it done, etc., etc. So we can work with you to create some simplistic standard operating procedures so that all your representatives are following the same pattern. What you want to do is make sure that everyone follows the same sequences, whether you retain copies or not, whether you, how you do remote hires. So it's critical that you adopt some standard operating procedures. They don't have to be 20 pages. You want them simplistic so that everyone knows exactly what your unique structures are and how you utilize an electronic system. Unauthorized workers remaining on payroll. Certain individuals have expiring document dates that must be updated, and those are related to work eligibility documents. The system, when somebody is, for example, an alien authorized to work until, there's a date there. Prior to that date, that individual is required to bring in a document, and that date is extended. Now, there are certain categories that have been extended automatically, 180 days, but it's very complex, the law. So we want to make sure through the compliance dashboard that you are recognizing those individuals whose documents are going to be expiring. So in addition to being an icon on the dashboard, we also send out expiring document alerts. So you're also going to receive an email. And it's very simple from that point. You notify the employee, make sure they bring in a document prior to that expiration date. When they do bring in the document, it's as easy as going in the system, locating the I-9 record, and updating it in Section 3. Receipts. It's well accepted that somebody can provide you a receipt for a document for a lost, stolen, or replacement document. When they provide you a receipt, there's follow-up action required because in 90 days from the date of the receipt, they must bring in the real document. When they bring in the real document, you simply edit Section 2, remove the receipt designation, and then at that time you'd be able to process E-Verify, because you cannot submit an E-Verify query when somebody has provided you a receipt. You must wait until the actual document is provided. So unauthorized workers, we send out email alerts 120, 90, 60, and 30 days prior. You have a dashboard icon, which you'll see a few slides coming up that'll identify those records too. E-Verify, we talked about it. E-Verify, you submit the query to E-Verify, it comes back with a result. It's either going to be employment authorized, sometimes it's a tentative non-confirmation, which doesn't mean the individual is not eligible to work. It means there's a discrepancy at either SSA or DHS. You want to make sure that E-Verify, if you've got a decentralized E-Verify closure process, that everyone is following the same guidelines and they're making sure the employee knows what to do. So the system will guide them through the sequences they need to follow and make sure that the employee understands what they need to do. And we also want to make sure that anyone that receives a final non-confirmation or a DHS no-show who's not eligible to work does not continue to work. And that can be done through the use of the dashboard. Civil penalties, we talked about it before, the increase. Employers with multiple violations will face a new maximum penalty of $21,563 for employing foreign nationals who are unauthorized to work in the U.S. So it's critical that the individuals who have expiring documents are updated timely and effectively, and you can do that through the use of the system. E-Verify common mistakes and misconceptions. If you use E-Verify, you must use it once you sign the MOU and it's activated going forward for all new hires. The dashboard, again, will identify those individuals that have not been run through E-Verify, so you have immediate reference point. You can't use the system to go back and check your current employees unless you're a federal contractor and you've executed and identified yourself as a federal contractor when we sign you up for E-Verify. You can't use the system prior to hire. So the I-9 form is only done after offer acceptance. It's not done prior. Offer acceptance, I-9 form. I-9 form, then you E-Verify. So you can't use it to pre-screen individuals. Handling mismatches. You want to make sure if somebody receives a tentative non-confirmation that they're given the ample opportunity to contest that. There are inconsistencies in the database. Everyone is assumed to be in work eligible until the system tells you otherwise. So you want to make sure that everyone is trained, and we've created a sequence in E-Verify that everyone should understand. It goes step by step exactly through the process. When somebody does get a tentative non-confirmation and they do contest, you put that employee to work. You don't delay the start of work based on a tentative non-confirmation. The system will send you an email when there's been an update in the database. And you never request that the employee tell you that they've contacted SSA or Department of Homeland Security. The employee's responsibility, they have 8 federal government work days to do so. You don't ask them for verification, you'll get an email. We'll pick up on the update and we'll send you an email. So it makes E-Verify simple. Not treating E-Verify seriously. There are specific requirements that the employer signs when they utilize E-Verify within the Memorandum of Understanding. So you want to make sure that E-Verify is done correctly. There is a monitoring division in E-Verify that monitors employer usage. So that monitor division is going to look and see the sequences, what's going on, how cases are being closed. If you're using the photo tool, they want to make sure you're maintaining photocopies of the records and how many cases are being referred and suspected misuse, abuse, and or fraud to appropriate agencies. So E-Verify, if it's not being used correctly, could result in you receiving a notice of inspection. It just depends. We talked about the future is mandatory E-Verify. The new government, new president, is very, very favorable to mandatory E-Verify. You're going to see mandatory E-Verify where all employers have to use the E-Verify system. It makes no sense to just do an I-9 form, file it away with no verification on it. Once you use E-Verify, you will confirm everyone that is hired is eligible to work in the United States. Mandatory E-Verify is coming soon. Monitoring electronic database, you can utilize the system through AccuSource, electronic I-9 only. If you don't want to use E-Verify, you don't have to. You can use the electronic I-9 with E-Verify. Simple sequence. We're integrated. We were the beta test site for Web Services. It's a simple click of a button, or based on how your organization's set up, it's an automatic process once Section 2 signed. Or you want to stay with a paper I-9 process and just use E-Verify, that's available too. Payroll feeds, it's best practice, obviously, if you use an electronic system to identify that all new hires have an I-9 on file. Verify dates of hire, make sure the date of hire in your payroll or HRIS system matches the I-9 form. Monitor terminations and tag I-9s as terminated so they can be purged based on the 1-year, 3-year rule. Subject matter expertise is critical. You either have it internally or you have it externally. Form I-9 is an external subject matter expert with I-9 and E-Verify. There is no sequences I haven't seen. I take pride in identifying what the standard operating procedures should be. We discuss them. We make sure that everyone's on the same playing field, and then we do training. Becomes very easy, very simple to do. Training is critical. Again, everyone must use it the same way. So we pride ourselves in training protocols in addition to training guides that are established based on how the system's being used. And there's several ways the system can be used. It's all just based on your current processes. Single source database. Here's an example of the compliance dashboard. So dashboard is permission-based. You can see the advantage of this in this screenshot. You've got the electronic I-9 there, and then you've got the scanned I-9s. Electronic I-9 is obviously the ones completed in the system. You've got the active, terminated, retained, when somebody's terminated, still under retention. Re-verification due, expiring work document. It's going to identify in the dashboard. There's also reports. You can pull up reports, but I guarantee you that monitoring the dashboard is going to give you compliance. Scanned I-9's historical records. Best practice, you put them in the system. We scan them, we index them. If you're with an electronic I-9 vendor currently, we can take those records electronically and put them in the system as a PDF and associated index and audit logs. Terminated, retained, again, terminate the record, purge it, 1 year, 3 year rule. Re-verification due on your historical records. Easy, simple dashboard icon. You also have the 120, 90, 60, 30-day email alerts that go out. Down below, re-verification expired, both electronic and with scans means the work document was not updated timely, and you have somebody on your payroll that has an expired document whose I-9 record hasn't been updated. Remember, we have seamless Section 3 update capabilities on the electronic I-9 and also on the scanned records. Those would be updated electronically as well. So that's a brief screenshot, and if anyone wants to see a more concise demonstration of the system, please contact AccuSource and we can help facilitate that. Becoming audit ready. I mentioned this before, but the I-9 is a requirement, and anytime you can get an audit notice. There was just a Department of Justice just issued in June of this year, they issued a $600,000 fine against an employer who was executing discriminatory practices on their I-9s. They were actually requiring permanent residents to update their permanent resident documents. Well, the employer was ultimately fined $400,000, and they were also required to put $200,000, making the total $600,000, into a pool for back wage and payments to those individuals who were ultimately terminated, which they shouldn't have been. They were also requiring non-U.S. citizens who did not require updates to update their I-9 records. So the employer was not well trained as to what the protocols were with their I-9 system. So it's critical, again, there's no rhyme or reason for who gets a notice of inspection, but you must be prepared. So you'll get a subpoena, you'll have 3 business days to provide the records. That's easy. If they're in the system, you call up AccuSource, they get a hold of us. We will export those records timely. We'll also stand in and do a demonstration for the ICE auditor. I've done several of those. We'll go over the standard operating procedures and internal business processes with them so we can identify how you're using the system, what you did, when you started using it, etc. They'll audit the records, and then they'll come back with the results. There'll be inspection results. There'll be a notice of suspect documents, notice of discrepancies, technical failures, which you have a 10-day correction period on those. But we can address those prior if we audit the records before memorializing them. Then you'll either get a warning notice or a notice of intent to fine. It's a whole sequence of events. They take the number of I-9s, they use percentages, they come up with a potential fine, and they'll issue a notice of intent to fine. You want to eliminate the concern on that and the nightmares that can create. Get your house in order now. Start using or move over and start using electronic system through AccuSource. or memorialize your paper forms, start using the electronic I-9, put everything in the database, and you have a single source dashboard for all your records. It's certainly going to let you sleep better at night when you know everything's there and you've done the best you can to maintain compliance from the past and also moving forward. This is advantages of an electronic system. It's something I created several years ago. It basically identifies a decision point. So everyone makes a decision, they're going to move to an electronic system. So that's the electronic implementation date. Or you may already be using a system and maybe you don't like it. Maybe it's not compliant. There's certain requirements related to a system that vendors need to adhere to. Most important being the audit log behind the electronic that captures the sequence of completion. So the electronic implementation over on the right side in blue is the electronic I-9. We talked about it. It's a smart form. Doesn't eliminate timeliness issues, but it should eliminate most of the errors that can be done in creating the form. You get the alerts, Section 3 updates, 24/7 access, termination purge capabilities. E-Verify is an add-on to the I-9 or standalone. It'll verify the employment, one-click easy submission. We'll give you the tutorials and the testing. You don't have to go on to E-Verify and do that. We are a web services employer agent. As I said, we were the beta test site for that. Then you have the electronic storage. You have everything you need, reporting, dashboard, identify missing I-9s, etc. Over on the right. Historical records, best practice, do an I-9 audit. We'll identify the errors, omissions, discrepancies. We will give you back those I-9 records. You can facilitate the correction. We're going to identify missing I-9s, those that can be purged. We're going to guide you through the process on how to go back and do an I-9 for somebody that was hired 6 years ago that you couldn't locate the I-9. Give you step-by-step instructions. You're going to do the remediation. Remember, Section 1 can only be done by the employee. We've actually taken the remediation a step further, and the auditor on a paper audit will actually do some of the remediation in Section 2 with the approval of the employer by making the change, initial and dating it. Some of those things that can be corrected are dates of hire discrepancies. If the source documents are attached and something's missing, such as issuing authority, something like that, that can be added. Making sure the address and everything is complete, so on and so forth. Some things can't be corrected. Some things cannot be corrected by the auditor. But at the end of the day, we can help facilitate that because we know everyone's day is busy, and the last thing they want is 1,000 I-9 records with corrections needed. So we help you through that process. And then you have the storage, electronic capture storage. You have 24/7 access to your historical records. So at the end of the day, I think all employers must ask themselves these simple questions. Do you know if your existing records are compliant? Well, that's a good question. Who knows unless you're doing a daily audit on them if they're compliant or not. So let's get them compliant the best we can. Again, timeliness issues can't be corrected, but they can be addressed moving forward. The 1-day, 3-day rule. They are substantive errors. They are finable events if you're doing it outside those time frames. We want to address those. Could you provide your records within the 72-hour notice of inspection? 72 hours, they come back, they ask for the records. Or do you have to go look for them? Where are they? If they're in the system, it's as easy as picking up the phone and making a call. Have you completed an audit, internal or external, of your records to see if they're compliant or not? Most important, too, is are you missing any I-9 records? Common problem. I was just at a presentation this morning, and this organization has 80,000 current employees, and they estimated that they are missing maybe 10% of those. They don't really know, but we're going to do an audit on those and find out who they're missing. Now, that's step one. Say you're missing 500. Now you have to address how you communicate with those employees, why you're communicating the fact that their I-9's missing, and time frame you're giving them to bring in their documents. And then you want to make sure you don't E-Verify somebody that was hired 10 years ago because you weren't signed up for E-Verify. All those things come into play. Are you updating your I-9 records? Most organizations will do an I-9 form. If they're doing it in paper, put it in a file cabinet, never look at it again. They don't terminate it and purge it based on the regulations of retention. They don't update Section 3 based on expiring work documents. So are you doing that? Are you purging I-9 records? Most organizations don't if they're using a paper-based process. Do you have a current vendor? There's huge advantages of using electronic systems. They just have to be implemented correctly. This is not just a software as a service, here you go, good luck. It's a software as a service with a caveat saying, we're not going to let you start using the system until everyone's on the same page and we've implemented a process that's going to make it easy for your representatives to get through the I-9 E-Verify sequence. The service layer is critical with this type of database. Now I got through that a little quickly. Hopefully I didn't want to take a lot of people's time, but we're going to open it up for Q&A now. Stephanie?
Okay, thank you so much, Thomas. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to another member of the marketing team, Courtney Woods, and she will go ahead and start with the questions.
Hi, Tom. Our first question is, what do we do with our existing paper forms?
Well, as I said during the presentation, what you do with your current paper forms is you do an audit on them, whether you have the internal expertise to do it or you have AccuSource do it. We do an audit. We correct what we can correct. We identify where there's inconsistencies on the I-9s, and then we put them in the database. We image them and index them. And then we come up with training protocols to hopefully eliminate any of the issues we saw in the audit. So bottom line answer to the question is, we'll index them, image them if we need to, and put them in the database so you have immediate access to them.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Question number 2, what if my employee can't get into an office to complete their I-9?
That's in relation to remote hire. Great question. If you have remote hires, and common nowadays is somebody is hired, I'm in Florida, I hire a salesperson in California. I'm not going to fly Mr. California out to Florida so I can do his I-9 form. So we have a way to send an invite to the new hire in California to do Section 1, air to text, they sign it. Once that's done, we can set up an appointment with a notary who will set up an appointment with the new hire, meet with them, complete Section 2, record their documents, touch and feel them, sign under penalty of perjury, not as a notary, as an individual. It's a notary network. There's 16,000 notaries in this network. And then the form's completed, the source documents are attached, and it's in your database and you've done the right thing. There's also an option for a friend, neighbor, spouse if you don't want to use the notary, and we can certainly talk more about that, but we have a few solutions to the remote hire situation.
Okay, thank you. Question number 3. How do I know how long I should keep an I-9 form?
Well, it's a little difficult. The retention rule is you keep an I-9 for as long as somebody's employed. Once somebody separates from the company, you have to maintain it either 3 years from the date of hire or 1 year after termination, whichever is later. Example, I hired somebody in 1992. I have to have that I-9 still. If they leave today, I have to keep it for another year. Or I hire somebody today, tomorrow they come in and they quit, I have to keep that I-9 form for 3 years. It's a little complex, in the requirements, but the advantage of an electronic system is all you have to do is put a termination date in there. The system will do the rest. So it makes it easy to abide by those regulations.
Okay. We have a hard time closing out our E-Verify cases. How does the monitoring help with that?
The monitoring of the dashboard helps with that because the dashboard clearly identifies E-Verify those cases that require action, those cases that are in process, and those cases that have been closed out inappropriately. So when you have access to the dashboard, all you do is click on the icon and you can see those cases so you can cross-reference in the database and make sure everybody has an employment authorized case. It makes it very simple for organizations to comply with E-Verify with the use of that dashboard and the number of email alerts we send out based on updates and action required.
Okay, and would you mind clarifying the 1 year and 3 year rule?
Sure. Once somebody completes an I-9 form and somebody separates from the company, you have to keep the form for either 1 year, 3 years from the date of hire, 3 years from date of hire, or 1 year after termination, whichever's later. So, for example, if I hire somebody today and they quit tomorrow, I have to keep that form for 3 years from today. Then I can purge it. If I hired somebody in 2005 and they're still an employee and they quit today, I have to maintain that form for an additional year. Again, the system just requires a termination date, and all the guesswork is gone because the system's coded so that it will purge that record according to that 1 year, 3 year rule.
Okay, thank you so much, Tom. That was our last question.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Courtney, for asking the questions. And Thomas, on behalf of our entire team here at AccuSource, I just want to extend another thanks to you and your team for today's presentation. And thank you to everyone in attendance as well. As previously stated, a copy of this recorded presentation will be available within 48 hours. You can request one by sending us an email to marketing@accusource-online.com. If there's nothing else, thank you all for participating today and have a great day.
Thank you.